Today, in our Spotlight segment, we're focusing on the growth of alternatives in Latin America. I am here in Tulum, Mexico for our second annual iCapital Connect LATAM event, and joining me to discuss the growth of alternatives in the region is Jorge Rovira, who's the co-founder and managing partner at Unicorn Strategic Capital. Jorge, it's great to see you here in Tulum.
Thank you, Anastasia.
You've spent the majority of your career covering Latin America, and then specifically the last 10 years focusing on alternatives, primarily institutional, but most recently alternatives in private wealth. So just share with us some of the key observations about the nuances of the region and how's the adoption of alts going in LATAM?
So I would say, first, you need to think about Latin America not as a whole country or one piece of land. It's actually many countries, many idiosyncrasies. And when it comes to wealth and alternatives, Latin America was at 0% when the world was at 10 allocation in the asset class. So we're building this from scratch. So when you mix all that and you bring this new layer of opportunity, you need to think about how to basically get into our client's business, understand the business, build the business from scratch. So all processes, risk, origination, operations, how do you bring all that? So think the US 30 years back, adopting alternatives. Given we are the only guys doing this for real with the different players, with the different intermediaries, adoption has been surprisingly fast. We thought this would take a long time. We thought it would take 2 years, 3 years to adopt.
Why do you think it is? Why do you think it's going faster than expected?
People needed it. So one, there was the need to have more decorrelation with the markets, better performance. And two, you had basically this burst of technology, hand in hand with iCapital and the semi-liquid evergreen structure. Everything came together, boom. We've seen huge adoption in the region in the past 2 years.
And so when it comes to alternatives, you mentioned Latin America is not a monolithic, piece of land. And similarly, when you think about the $17 trillion alternatives asset class, there's so many nuances and there's so many sub-asset classes, private equity, private credit, venture, et cetera. So I'm curious, are there specific strategies that Latin American clients gravitate to more than others?
Definitely. When it comes to wealth, again, most investors are income-oriented investors. So in the past 30 years, most people make their money and they invest in long-term bonds, corporate debt, et cetera. They like the cash flows. 60-40 in the US, 80-20 in Latin America, 80% bonds, 20% equity. So when you come in with a new asset class, the natural segue has been private credit. And about 85% of all the flows we've seen through iCapital in the last 2 years has gone to a direct lender.
Right. Do clients have the same expectations of forward returns in private credit than they did receive in the past?
Unfortunately, they do have the same expectations for this next 3 years. So everybody expects yields to stick. We have to be mindful, and that's part of what we do every day with clients, of saying, look, guys, things will change. Whatever you think will happen, rates going down, then the yields will naturally gravitate down as well. Or if rates stay higher for longer, you should expect some changes within the underlying companies and what's going on within the payouts. So if you want to keep the growth within these portfolios, you need to start looking into private equity. And we've seen that. People understand that they need to start moving along the curve in order to keep the portfolio working, right?
So there's this progression in terms of starting with private credit, maybe eventually going to private equity, but also I'm sure there's challenges and roadblocks along the way. So what are some of those and how are you a Unicorn working to address those?
So the first is education, right? How do you use it, how to implement it, what role it plays within the portfolio. But then you go to the business side of things and you also need to change mindsets, right? Why does this asset class make sense from a strategic perspective, business-wise, right? How do I implement? How do I change my sales processes? How do I hire different talent in order to pitch this new asset class? How do I run operations and reporting back to my clients? So across the board, we're definitely having to build ground up with many of our partners and clients, not only integrating the pitch, but also making it happen within their businesses, right?
And speaking of that, what are some of the other initiatives, along this roadmap to adopting more alternatives in Latin America? And I'm specifically thinking of model portfolios, and can they play a key role in that adoption process?
Latin Americans went from zero alts, to 53 options within the offshore marketplace, right? So you go from 0 to 100 miles per hour, like that, right? So that was actually the breakthrough for the ETF business. When the ETF became $400 billion industry into a $10 trillion industry, and you had factor ETFs, you had sector ETFs, you had market ETFs. What brought everything together was the model portfolio innovation. What iCapital is doing is following exactly the same recipe. You have a lot of options, you have a lot of asset classes. How do I bring those together in a proper portfolio that will take care of my clients' needs and suitability? Having a model portfolio focused on outcomes definitely makes adoption easier for an FA, for a multifamily office to talk to a client about where do you want to get to. These are the right combinations to get there. People use this as an educational framework, benchmark framework. I mean, there are a lot of applications for model portfolios that definitely get adoption faster.
That's exactly what we aim to solve with model portfolios at iCapital. So Jorge, let's come back to the event that we're hosting together with Unicorn here in Tulum. And what are your impressions? What are you hearing in the hallways? What's the chatter like about alternatives in LATAM here on the ground?
This is amazing. I mean, last year we had 120 participants. None of them were investing in alternatives yet. Most of them weren't users of the iCapital platform. So we tried to focus the event on education, very asset class focused, right? So what's private credit, what's infra, what's private equity, meet the GPs, like start networking with your different colleagues, etc. This year, we have 270 people, out of which 90% of them are current users of the iCapital platform. They're already invested. They're going through all this evolution of their business. So even when you look at the content of the event, it's all about data solutions, operations, product, investment ideas. Where are we going? Your outlook is broader, and now you can speak to an audience that actually is using the asset class. So everything you say is relevant for them. It's so motivating. To tell the truth, and people are happy. Tulum is amazing.
Tulum is amazing, and I certainly echo the sentiment. And it feels like this year the discussion is much broader. It's certainly includes a lot more participants, and it's also more multifaceted. So Jorge, with that, thank you very much for the conversation, and thank you very much to you and Unicorn for this ongoing amazing partnership with iCapital in Latin America. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been great.
And we'd like to hear from you. Send us an email at yourquestion@icapitalnetwork.com and let us know what questions are at the top of mind for you and your clients. I'm Anastasia Amoroso, and thank you for joining us today on Beyond 60/40. We'll see you next time.